I'm James and I work on biochemical databases at EBI. And I want to talk about the biochemistry of cider. We know what cider is, but how does it work? How do we get from apple juice to delicious cider? What's yeast and what part does it play in this process? So yeast is a fungus. It's related to mushrooms and that blue mould you get on bread. It's naturally found on the surfaces of grains and fruits. So if you look at rotting apples in an orchard and see those little beige blobs, that's yeast. Fungi, oddly, are more closely related to humans than they are to the plants they grow on, like apple trees. When yeast gets into some fresh apple juice, it consumes the sugar just like we do, and it turns it into energy and carbon dioxide. And this is called aerobic respiration, like aerobic exercise. It needs oxygen. When we don't have enough oxygen, we convert it to lactic acid. That's the same acid you get in sour milk, and it's why you can get a cramp if you suddenly run fast. When we do that, it's called anaerobic respiration, and it's 19 times less efficient than if you have oxygen available. That's why breathing's great. But if yeast doesn't have enough oxygen, say it's in a load of apple juice, it doesn't produce lactic acid, it produces alcohol. Ciders like the one in Simon's video, those are made of the natural yeasts found on the surfaces of the apples he presses. But some others have added yeast, and there's a good reason for this. Yeast can differ in their tolerance to alcohol, and beer yeast tends to tolerate a bit less than cider or wine yeasts. Also, different yeasts produce different chemicals when they're fermenting, and these different chemicals give interesting flavours and smells. One group's called esters. These give a kind of fruity smell that might be reminiscent of bananas or the sort of artificial pear flavour in pear drops from the sweet shop. This means the flavour isn't just from the apples, but from what strain of yeast you're using and what the conditions it's fermenting in are like. Yeast's a simple fungus. It's single-celled, unlike a mushroom or a mould where there's lots of cells all working together. And because of that, we can use it as what biologists call a model organism, when you make a little model of a big complex thing to understand how it works. We can look at its cells to learn more about how our own cells use the same parts and the same processes. And once you understand that, what if you can make the yeast produce not just alcohol, but whatever you wanted? We can put the gene into yeast that tells a cell how to make a human protein. Then we can use the yeast cell as a sort of test platform to see how that human protein works. Or we could use it as a factory to make a great deal of that protein. For example, if you know anyone with diabetes, or maybe have that yourself, you know they have to inject themselves with insulin before a meal so their blood sugar doesn't go up dangerously. The old way to do this was cow or pig insulin. But then, biologists worked out how to insert the DNA for human insulin into yeast, meaning the yeast would make identical human insulin in massive great quantities. And yeast's a lot easier to grow than pigs. You can just run it like you're doing a brewery. And it's much easier to harvest and purify the insulin out to make it safe for use. Thanks to brewing and cheese making and pickle making, people have been doing sort of applied biochemistry for about as long as there's been civilization. But what we can do with modern biology is understand how our parts work and adapt it even further.